Greetings, Darklings, from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. I have a very exciting guest, one that we've been building up to for a while. But before I jump into that, as always, if you send me stuff, I will wear it on the show and shout you out. This one is Cemetary Confessions. Danny has a very cool podcast page that's been going longer than ours by a long shot and just does a great job of talking about both new and classic goth bands. And I think the other thing I really like about their show is that they find poignant topics to everyone in the scene and they have really intelligent discussions about it as opposed to what I do. So I want to shout that out. You should definitely check that out. And also, they do the Belfry Network, which is taking a lot of different pages like this, including Sounds and Shadows, and kind of raising all boats with the tide and helping together. So shout out for Danny. And they have a Patreon page where you can support and should go check that out. All right. Without further ado, my next guest up is somebody who I've met a few times at Cold Waves. I've been a huge fan of their music. They have had single of the month, the Sounds and Shadows poll, a couple times. They also had album of the year. They were in the rankings for that. And I think just doing one of the most interesting, fresh things in modern industrial music. It is my extreme pleasure from Texas to welcome Eric, Unitcode Machine, to the show. Eric, welcome aboard.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. That was a day at work, but we got through it, and I'm excited. We have Rachel's birthday coming up this weekend, and we're going to go see Donna Archer's poetry reading over in Detroit. So that'll be a lot of fun. Rachel is a big fan of Donna as well. So it'll be an exciting birthday treat for her.
Nice, nice.
So to get started here, I talked a little bit about kind of where we ran into each other, and I got into your music. But I always like to ask a guest to start with, for maybe people that aren't as familiar. There was a moment, whether it was a show, an album, something you heard, something in life. You saw The Crow and decided to put costume paint on your face and wear a black trench coat, whatever it was, that kind of said to you, this scene is me and this is what I'm a part of. Tell me a little bit about that history and how you got turned on to electronic music and decided this is who I am.
So yeah, and using that a good example that you had, The Crow was kind of a good gateway point that introduced me to a lot of the really great bands that I actually fell in love with. In my early on in my life, I was listening to things, like Stone Temple Pilots, and a lot of early on it was very grungy in the early '90s, and then I transitioned over once I saw The Crow. I was like, oh, the soundtrack is fantastic. The movie was okay. The soundtrack is fantastic. Yes, I know I'm going to catch slack for that. It's not. It's an okay movie. It's not great. It's not the perfect film. And everybody getting behind the Bill Skarsgård problem and no, they're changing the thing. Oh, it's perfectly fine. It's totally okay to reimagine something, especially to bring new, fresh people into the.
It wasn't for me. It wasn't written for me in 2024, but nostalgic wise, the old one I felt like very
Oh
much
yeah,
was, and that's fine. That's a good thing.
that's great. Yeah, but the Crow soundtrack, the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, the Johnny Mnemonic soundtrack, these were all things that just pushed me into the scene and was just kind of like that point where I was discovering that there's an entire underground of music. I mean, and obviously bands like Nine Inch Nails, seeing the Closer video. One of my first experiences was actually seeing the Down In It video when I was a kid on 120 Minutes before I saw the Closer video, and I thought that was really cool. And seeing bands like Sounding Westward on 120 Minutes, with the latter, I've managed to go ahead and actually work with Chris Hall of the band, so that way I mean, that kind of puts it in a position where it's like, oh wow, we come full circle.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because I've managed to work with also Chris Moretta of Nine Inch Nails on a single, and he did a remix for me. So it's this really weird, like, holy crap, I'm working with all of the people who are my idols and stuff like that.
Isn't life insane sometimes how that happens? Like, I have those moments constantly, and it blows my mind still. Like, I just think of, like, 16-year-old Ken in his room, crying 'cause, some girl didn't love him back or something, and that I get to now talk to these people, interview them. It blows my mind, and like you said, having Chris Hall work with you directly and do that, it just shatters you sometimes.
It's one of those things where it's like, I did not believe, if you told 14, 15, 16-year-old Eric, hey, by the way, when you turn, a little older, you're going to be working with people who you really looked up to when you were a kid, and you're going to be shocked about what feedback you get from them and all of these things. And yeah, it's crazy. It was
I do
absolutely
think about
crazy.
that all the time. Like, I wish I could go back in a time machine to like 15-year-old Ken who just got like beat up for wearing eyeliner and just be like, hang in there, kid. Because someday Rodney from the Dead Milkman is going to wish you happy birthday on your birthday or something, just, unbeknownst to nothing. And trust me, hang in. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had this history, you were enthralled by this music. Tell me a little bit about the transition, how that went into you making your own music and what that was like for you in the beginning. How did you get into the point where you said, I can do this too, I can write this? And what did that kind of early attempts at songwriting look like for you?
Oh, so my early attempts at songwriting actually kind of came from the fact that I started playing guitar at a young age. So like 13, 14 years old, I wanted to pick up the guitar. I was really like really into like Nirvana and stuff like that. And I liked Kurt Cobain a lot. But at that age, like I was just feeding off of whatever was in my mom or my dad's favorite music. But my mom did have excellent taste in music. My father, on the other hand, uh, I should say does. She's still with us. So um, but getting into Nirvana and then that petering period at the same time, because I was 13 or 14 when The Crow came out, and when I saw the Mortal Kombat thing and got into KMFDM and stuff like that, I really appreciated the work that like Gunter Schultz was doing with KMFDM, and I wanted to play guitar. I started transitioning from wanting to write like grunge licks, and I guess chord progressions, not licks, to like wanting to migrate over to like the technicality that like Gunter Schultz had or Steve White. So
Yeah. No, that's very, very cool. And I think some of the things you mentioned too, we've talked a little bit before, like this latest string of albums, and I want to jump into that and kind of talk about the newest one, are uh, not just concept albums in and of themselves, but like a trilogy of them. Like you kind of had a narrative that you really wanted to tell right off the bat with your music. Tell me a little bit about that and why it was kind of important to you that like I'm just not trying to throw out banger singles. I'm trying to take people on, I mean, which is great. I love banger singles, but like take people on a narrative journey, in a Pink Floyd-esque vein,
mm,
while doing electronic industrial popish music.
yeah. So the idea was it's an unfinished trilogy currently. Critical Thought being chapter two in the trilogy. But the idea was I looked at when I started writing themes for a collapsing empire. I wanted to do that as an example of examining how the world impacted me. And with Critical Fault was is an examination of how I am and how what my actions and what I do is an impact on myself. So there's a lot of self-referential stuff, even though it's told from certain perspectives. Like it's told to a third party. Some of the songs are speaking to certain people and things like that. And yeah, there are some songs in there that lead in directions away from just myself, but Critical Fault was basically trying to encapsulate all of the harm and all of the damage and all of the things that this character that I had tried to perpetuate in my early music career, what that did to me and what it continued to do to me up until, this point.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of looking at, how can I tell this story where I'm hurt and I hurt myself, not because of anything else other than not identifying with who I am and not being who I am. And that's one thing. If I could tell anybody, be who the person you want to be is. Like that was like my mother would always say. It's like you need to respect people for who they are, but you also need to respect yourself for who you are.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love the concept of it, and I love the kind of internal macro thinking where, yeah, this is I'm looking within, but also I'm looking within on how everything that's happening in here is also affecting the bigger picture around me and how the bigger picture is pouring things into my self identity. Like it's
Yeah.
a heady concept, but at the same time I think one that is it has to be the most utterly relatable aspect of the human experience, right? I mean, we all have to do that on some level, like figure out the push and pull between that. And just like you said, say to ourselves, which part of this is my id and ego and identify that.
Exactly, and that was kind of the thing. But you make a point to where you said it was on the influence of external things. That's kind of what chapter 3 is going to be. I'm not going to release the title of the album name.
Yeah.
I already have that concept, and that's kind of the way that this structure works. But I have that impact, and it's at this point I want to tell I want to tell this another story, but I want to tell the story of that same character that I was and how that character had an impact around on the world around me. So it's in 3 phases. Phase 1, themes for a collapsing empire, was how the world and COVID and all of the things that happened and friends leaving and family dying and all of these things, how that made an impact on me. Critical fault is how everything that I did in the past and everything that I currently am and everything through the pandemic, what that made me become, and when it was the right time to pull the mask off, to strip away that false identity of who I thought I was. And it was the realization of that awakening that kind of put that. And the next chapter I want to tell is the harm that I did. I want to do this and do that like but it's like the two sides, the kind of creating the yin and the yang. I want to tell the story of the harm that I did and the good that I've done. But I don't want to be cheesy about it. So it's not going to be like in previous examples, like I'm not really a cheesy artist, so I'm not going to lean into cheese or anything like that. But like I kind of want to. I feel like the next step is to address my own faults to the world, being that these are the things that I've done to you. These are the things that I've created, and it's going to be storytelling. It's going to be like some of this thing is going to be people looking at it in a position of like it's a character at that point, right? But it's going to be a character saying, "I've done you wrong. I liked what I did," type thing. It's like that at the time I did that. And at the time, I'm using this as an example. I'm not saying that this is the subject matter. I'm just saying there might be some taboos that lean into things. And I'm not very much a taboo artist. I'm very much a kind of self-examination, create art for art's sake type person, but I also try and make it like a banger.
No, I absolutely love that, and I think it is. It's a fresh concept. And another thing while you were talking there that I really love, I think one of the modern downfalls, in particular, of uh, novels. Like I read a lot of sci-fi, fantasy stuff like that, but also television and movies and how those novels get adapted there. I think one of the things that we really, I don't know, fell off, and maybe it's just the post-capitalist world, is that people start these stories and they don't really have an end in mind when they do it. They're just trying to get signed for the next season without really knowing, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there. I'll figure it out where it lands when I get there. And when I no, tell me that's not true. How many times have
Well,
you
no,
watched a show lately where like you get to season 5 or whatever and you're like, what a freaking letdown because you never really had a plan here, did you?
look, if you're going to call out George R. R. Martin specifically, just say his name.
Now George has his written, those bastards, Dan and Dave, did him dirty with that. So all right, I am a true George believer. So no, I'm not going to use that example. But I will say, take like the show Lost, I think is a great
Yeah.
example of that, where there was no, I think, game plan for what the end was going to be, or it changed a million times. So I like hearing you say, I have a pretty clear idea. I don't have the album done yet. I'm not going to talk about the title, but I know where I'm going. I know where I
Yeah.
want this journey to happen. And again, time happens. And like you said, this is introspective. So you're going to, who knows what you might learn and grow on between now and then. But you
Yeah.
have a picture in your head, at least, of where you want to go and what you want this to be.
I mean, it's standard storyboarding for a lot of, and a lot of novelists do that. I mean, like Terry Pratchett was very famous of understanding his lore and creating the world and writing down the key pieces. I mean, another great example of it, and this is not. A lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, no, he ham-fisted all of this stuff together into big one giant big universe." Stephen King did not do that. He had the foresight to create these pieces and continue to add to the world, but tried to make it make sense.
Yeah. No, no, I agree. And there's a few other authors I really like in the modern kind of fantasy or sci-fi genre that do that really well. But 90% of them often I think don't. They don't know where they were going with this. So I wanna turn the car back now. We're gonna go into the slide here and come back to part two, which is the most recent release, and this is what you're going to be touring on probably a lot and playing. Let's talk a little bit about that part specifically and what part of the narrative this was for you. And what maybe some of the songs that stand out to you that you were trying to tell this story of your inward journey and looking at that. I know. Okay, sorry, that was a heavy question. That went all over the place.
Well, this is like so. I'm having a hard time discerning what the question is.
Yeah, yeah. So let's
We
get
might
back.
want to mark. We might want to mark that one and be like, "Hey,
So
let's
let's
get
get back
hands
to
up."
critical felt specifically. Okay, that's what I want
Okay.
you to talk about. Is tell me about critical fault and like some of the singles, cold, blind. That came out in there. How did that tell this story you were trying to tell? And what was important for you that's going to help jump to the next part?
So starting the lead single off of the Critical Fault album was "Undone."
Mhm.
I wrote "Undone" at the time when I was sitting inside the hospital room watching my mother basically dying. She was in emergency care, and I'm looking at this, looking at like the last strong family connection that I have, and asking myself, how can I keep going on if this is the last person in my life that actually means anything to me, that's part of my family, that's part of the family unit. And I just that desperation, that feeling of like guilt because I wasn't there for my mom as much as I could have been. That feeling of anxiety that I don't think that I was the best son in the world. That self-referential, like I could have done things better. I could have done this. I could have done that. I could have spent more time with her. And that feeling that like the entire world was coming undone in front of me. And that was that like whole push, just like, oh, this is the song. I literally got home and I cranked it out in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I sent it off to Chris, and Chris did magic with it. He wasn't even expecting that song. I'm like, here's the stems. He's like, which song is this? I'm like, this is a new one. Go with it.
That's amazing. And also, I want to like call out kind of to the discussion we had earlier, the kind of courage, because I've been there, that takes to as somebody who was a hero to you, a musical inspiration, and say, not just here is my baby, because our songs are our babies, such a deeply raw, personal concept and song, and to hand that over to someone else. What did that feel like? to try and get that feedback. And in that moment of probably time standing still, is he going to fucking hate it? Is he going to fucking hate it? Is he going to let, and then he says something and you finally breathe.
Uh, yeah. So this is something I'm very good at. I'm able to compartmentalize and get things into a position where I'm employing you in this instance because I hired Chris,
Sure.
but I hired Chris specifically to help me with the production of the work. I loved his remix that he did of Falling Down. I thought that was a great remix. I loved everything that he did with that remix. And he had mentioned, hey, if you're ever looking for a producer, I'd love to produce an album for you. So when I reached out to him after, a while after Cold Waves, that when I had the opportunity to meet him, which is a story, the intent behind that, the entire ability for me to go, okay, I'm not the smartest person in the room here. While I can write books and I can have good ideas, I literally have to make sure that I understand that he has the full freedom and I can always say, I don't like this.
Right.
And everything he sent back to me was practically perfect. It was funny. It was just this perfect working situation where I would crank a song out together and I would send it off to him. And I wasn't concerned. I wasn't afraid. I was like, I'm relying on someone who in my youth, I idolized. And coming to grow to be more of a friend to Chris, it's been something that I would like. It's been an honor to work with him and everything he's done, and that whole like being able to just blindly hand something over to him because I had the confidence in his skills and abilities because he's fucking Chris Hall.
But also to your point, and I love that you said this, you hired a top of the game professional to do a specific thing for you where you didn't have as much expertise. You had enough expertise to tell him exactly what you needed, but you then trusted him to execute that. And I love hearing you say that like, because I could see myself just kind of, and I have like people like that I looked up to so much. I was too afraid to be like, wait a minute, I hired you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, here's what I need you to do because I'm just so.
Well, one thing to consider, and this is something that a lot of artists are self-producing, especially in our genre. They do a lot of self-production. But if you look back in our history, if you look back at a lot of the older bands that they may have signed to labels like 4AD and things like that, and they still sought for production help from people. So like the vast majority of the stuff that was released on 4AD was produced by John Fryer. So yeah. And then having that, having John Fryer being in production at person first, having Westward and Steve Albini and Chris Lord Alge, all of these producers are there specifically that have done the things and the albums that we all love and enjoy. Yes, there are musicians who are fantastic producers, but not every fantastic musician is a fantastic producer. And you got to be willing to take the rails off. You got to be willing to take the bumpers down. You got to be able to say to yourself, if I want to grow as a musician, if I want to grow as an artist, I have to be willing to look beyond what my own skill set is and get help from other people.
No, I love that. And I love hearing you say that. I honestly up there with lyrics, which is another thing I think, people saying all the time, oh, back in the day, it was music or whatever back in the day. I don't really think that's true. I think from so many production aspects, I think from the fact that it is so much more DIY now, where you don't have to like go to a label to hope you get 4 hours in a 20K studio or something and hope you get the right take in the 4 hours you have or something. Now, everybody can have a studio that good in their bedroom for the most part. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
the freedom that people have musically now to just whatever popped into my head, that's what I can record. And if I want to overlap 78 guitar tracks, I can sit here all night and just keep going until I'm done. But I think it is lost a little bit on what you said that back then, especially when it comes to production, mastering, so on and so forth, to be economical, a lot of people now wear that hat and take that on themselves in the same way they have to be a social media guru. They have to, be a merchandise guru. You have to do it all yourself. Whereas you used to be able to bring in more top experts and pay them to do the best possible version of your vision, you know and I think that's lost a little now, and I love hearing you say how important that is to you, to trust in a hired gun to make your vision even brighter you know
Yeah, I mean, to speak to that, a lot of the industry, a lot of the parts of the industry, I prefer to hire because number one, I'm not a graphic designer, so I hired Greg Rolfes. Greg Rolfes is a fantastic artist. I love his work.
to
I
start his
consistently- yes, he did.
No, that's
11, 12 designs, I believe it's called. Um, and he's done work for me in the past for in multiple releases at this point. Another my friend James Ashley, he does my merchandising. He designs my merchandising. I pay him. I pay all these people. You can find people within your budget that are better at these things than you. Don't always, just take a step back and be like, okay, so number one, what's my budget? Number two, is it worth reaching out to these people to go ahead and get the thing done? Just be willing to take that risk. Be willing to say, I'm going to drop $200 or $300 and have you design a T-shirt for me.
and be willing to listen to the people that you hire. I think that's another thing too, is you bring in an expert, find a way to check your own ego and be able to say, hey, I brought in Chris Hall. I paid for that. I should trust that what he is saying to me right now is something I should listen very carefully to.
And, and it's the standard principle of be smart enough to know that you're not always the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is definitely one of the things that I live by my principle in regards to that. And there's a number of things that I do that I try to tell other local artists and other bands. I let people ask me questions. I tell people very straightforward, like, if you're going to ask me about your music, if you're going to ask me if I like it or not, you might not like the answer, you might love the answer. I'm going to give it to you straight, and I'm going to overanalyze what you do. And that's what you're asking me to do. You're like, you're expecting me because you look at me in some way, shape, or form that you think I'm a position of authority. So I'm going to tell you, these are the things. Please do not get hurt. These are me examining and going into the minutia of what you do. You have to be able to take constructive criticism. You have to be able to be willing to accept that sometimes what you're doing is not the right thing, or it's not the best possible option, or you're spending too much money on advertising on Facebook, or you're doing all of these things. And it's like, you can find marketing guys, you can find all of these people to really, really help you. And yeah, I mean, just be willing to, most of the people that I work with, I either found through long-term friendships, Sounds and Shadows, the Sounds and Shadows Facebook group,
Yeah.
or just literally poking at the people that I do know that are in the industry. Like, hey, who's a good marketing guy? Hey, who's a good PR guy? William Zimmerman, excellent for Mooncoil Media. I like every single thing that he's done for me. Him and I have both grown at the same pace. His organization and my band have been just working very hard towards what our goals are. And I have a lot of respect for William. I have a lot of respect for Greg. I have a lot of respect for James. Everybody in the industry that I've had the opportunity to work with are fantastic people. Ask me questions. If you want a reference, I'll pass your information along to them and say, hey, they're looking for a job.
Right. No, I love that and love hearing it. And yeah, so I mean, obviously doing the review page and everything else, I get that a lot too. And even bands that have become friends that, will reach out at like 2 a.m. and be like, hey, Ken, I have this idea. Listen to this and tell me what you think. And I often have to like go back to them and say, what are you looking for here? Is it like very specific kind of, electronic or range or mix feedback, or do you just want to know, does this slap or not? Because honestly, like, that's the best way that I can really give feedback. Like, Stephen Archer is a good example of that. I'm never going to go to Steven when he sends me something late at night and try and pick it apart and give the detail. Because frankly, I don't have a bigger level of expertise than him. But where I do have expertise and he comes to me is, am I on the right track? Like, does this hit or does it not? Because if I'm
Yeah.
not on the right track, then I can just change veins right now. But it's important to kind of know how you're doing that feedback. All right, I love this. We got on a really good tangent there, and that was great stuff. I want to shift over a little bit because also you have a big tour coming up where you're going to be doing live shows here. And I had an interview the other day and was discussing it with Mr. Watts. And I want you to tell me a little bit about, you're going to be there. We were just saying with Stoneburner, you opening for Pig and Raymond on some of these shows. Tell me a little bit about how you're excited for that and how Unitcode Machine is different when you're taking it out on the road for a live audience versus what you're doing when, it's you in a studio, writing these ideas and sending them off to Chris or someone else.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be on the full run for the heroin for the Damn tour. So we will be starting. We're not playing Cold Waves, unfortunately, but that's okay. We will be there in attendance, checking out, saying hi to people and stuff like that. But we will be for all of the other shows. Unicode Machine will be playing on all of the other dates.
So I'll get to see you in Detroit finally.
Yes,
I'll be there.
I will be playing.
I'll see you there at Snap.
I will be playing at Smalls. I look forward to be playing that venue. It's just north of the border from Canada. I love saying that.
If you never have it, Smalls is one of my favorite. It's such an intimate, awesome venue. You will absolutely love it. It's a very cool place.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so we're going to be. So I actually signed on to open up or to be the support for Pig for this, and I'll be doing actually light design work for them as well. So I have a light show. Raymond has a light show that I'm working on, and I'll be doing all of those things, and it should be fun. I'm really looking forward to that. The live experience for Unicode Machine has always been a live band. In the studio by myself. In live setting, I like to have other members on stage. Depending upon the environment, I'll either have a guitarist, drummer, guitarist, keyboardist, so on and so forth. Just adding those elements as needed to kind of be flexible with the artists that I can work with. Because I feel like what I write is dynamic enough where it could fit into an alt rock situation, like opening up for Stabbing Westward, which I've done before. But then at the same time, also being able to open up for harder bands like Combi Christ, or in this case, Raymond Watts' Pig, and which is huge for me. So I have on the Pig run, I'll have a guitarist, a friend of mine named Ryan Lynch. I don't know why I said Ryan. I'm looking forward to the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. That's why I said Ryan. Yeah.
No, I know Ryan. Sounds and Shadows got a great guitar player. Very cool.
Yep. And I have to let Raymond announce the other drummer, or my drummer, which is the drummer that's also going to be drumming for Pig as well.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I can't tell who that is. Big shush. No tells. This next section is going to be off the record.
No, maybe we'll add it later.
Huh?
We'll talk about it later. We'll do it at the end.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Then keep that front part. Keep that front part then.
Work for me, Eric.
Okay. I apologize.
All right. So anyhow, you're gonna have the drummer, the guitar player there when you're doing it live. Any other parts that you're adding in?
A light show that's pretty intense. I have about 30 lights that I have, give or take a few. And the light package technically the ground package for this is quite intense. It's going to be, so these light poles that are behind me, that some of the kind of a little weird and stuff like that. I built these myself, complete DIY. Yeah, there's 6 of them currently. I'm going to expand it later on, but the venue sizes that I'm playing, 6 is going to be enough. I want this tour to be special. not just for Pig, but for myself as well. Because I have this like literally to the weirdest series of events have happened in my life. I managed to work with multiple idols: Chris Hall, Chris Verena, Dwayne Daxing, uh, Tom Shear, um, the Born Baton, having the opportunity to go on tour with Pig, Raymond Watts. I mean, fundamentally, and it's public knowledge that Ed Ash is going to be there. So, and it's like all of these people who are going with, yeah, it's but every single one of them had such a key element to my where my journey is, not just as a young person, not just as a kid. I have managed to somehow have that weird case of luck where I managed to work with the same people I idolized when I was 14, 15 years old.
Also, shout out to Stefan. You said that before, but it's his birthday today. So
Yes, it is.
birthday. All right, I want to go back and talk for 1 second, if we can, about how the fluorescent sausage is made. You said you did this DIY. What did you have to do to make those weird alien probe lights that you have behind you?
Okay, so there's a so the video that I actually referenced a video from a gentleman from Canada. His YouTube channel is Super Valid Designs. Um, he made these light poles and he went through this thing of, oh, here's all these pieces that you can use that you can buy from Home Depot. Here's all the things that you need to do to build it out. You need a DMX and decoder. You need this, you need that. And I also lovingly called the light unit Mr. Sparkle. But for the most part, this is ultimately like aluminum or steel strips from Home Depot, Lowe's, T12 light tubes, LED strips, and hand soldering a whole bunch of wiring.
Oh, wow. That's so
Yeah.
cool. I can't wait. I'm gonna have to when I go see you there in Detroit. I'm gonna have to go try and get a look up close so I can really make it out and see that. But that's so freaking neat, and it kind of throws me back to we talked about Steven a little bit, but doing the DIY thing where he always says, "Look, I know the cost of touring and putting on a big, exciting stage show for people can feel daunting." But he
Mhm.
said, in this era with the internet where you can get any book imaginable, any video, and learn how to pretty much do anything if you're willing to put the sweat into it to make your vision real. I just love to see that. That's so freaking cool that like you wanted to make this a thing, found how to do it, got your ass to Home Depot, brought it home and got out your soldering gun and got it together. Like that's freaking exciting, dude. That's awesome.
Yep. Well, I didn't give out my soldering gun. I bought my first soldering gun, and this is all a first time attempt. This is all the first time I saw this thing, and I was like, I have to do this. And that's one of the things. There was a lot of trial, there was a lot of error, but I managed to go ahead and get that process. I've always been, as an artist, a long time running for the vast majority of my music career. I have been a DIY person, releasing my own material for the lion's share of my career. Um, because I've been around a lot longer than the last two albums that have come out. Some people know those two albums backwards and forwards and are super fans. And I love you. I love you for that. Thank you so much for being a super fan. But like I'm just used to doing things for myself, and that's probably because of some latent trauma from being a kid and having to do everything myself anyway. That latchkey kid stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, those are the that's why your parents are so good at it because they know where those buttons are because they're the ones who put them there, or just the people from your youth. They know just where to push them because they're the
Yeah.
ones who laid them down for you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the last thing before we get over towards the end that I really wanted to talk about is like you said, you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been playing music for quite a while, but it is pretty recent that working with COP, working with, Chris and people like this and doing all this, you've gone through a pretty major level up in change in how you're viewed within the industry and life in this. What has been staggering to you about that? And maybe a good way to do this, you mentioned before the Chris Hall story of first
Yeah.
approaching him at Cold Waves, but what has that been like to really have those few moments where you're like, life is different than it ever was right now for me, and the people I can just walk up to and have a conversation about music with that I never could have imagined before.
How so to rephrase that in a way that I'm comprehending the question is that how has life changed since this rapid ascent into a more known person
Being on
in the
tour
industry?
with Freaking Pig, okay? It 17 years ago, if someone had said, "Oh, yeah, I got a feeling, Eric, next year is your year. You're gonna be on tour opening for Raymond Watts." And what you would have thought of them saying that versus today, when that is the reality of your life.
Yeah. So being able to comprehend this entire jump within the past couple of years. Um, I've always wanted to be a professional musician, a full-time professional musician, doing music, working in the industry, that's production, remixing, so on and so forth. Um, the process of being able to gain that through a number of years of trying to do building blocks was my plan. That was best laid plans of mice and men. Unfortunately, was a road to nowhere. At a certain point, well, man, it's that's the thing. I had to rip the band-aid off, right? And I just took the initiative of myself and saying,
Yeah.
okay, if I want this, I'm just going to have to stop being timid about it, stop being scared about it. Is it scary where everything's going and how fast it's moving? I mean, point blank, I'm losing my job over going on tour with Pig. Like I'm literally having to quit my job to go on tour with Pig, and I don't care that I'm quitting my job because this is what I want.
And you're betting on yourself.
Yeah, I'm betting on myself. That's the most important thing. But is it scary? Hell yeah. It's
Yeah.
super fucking scary. I'm going through a position now where it's like, okay, am I making the right moves? Because everything is going so fast. I can't always keep up with things. And there's been a lot of coping mechanisms that I'm building from this, some of them good, some of them not so good. Um, and I'm trying to curtail the not so good ones. And I'm doing a good job at putting myself in that position where it's like, no, no, this is bad, go this direction. But it's like my behavior online has changed. My behavior interacting with people has changed. All of these things have changed because I've had to remove myself from a certain level of focus on the outside world. I can't market myself as much as I used to. I was marketing when Themes for a Collapsing Empire was the thing. I was unemployed. It was COVID, and I was able to spend all of my time marketing, writing, putting together, producing, cranking out that album. I don't have that luxury anymore. I have my day job. I have to plan lights. I have to do all these other things. So, and I have to be smart about the fact that are these moves that I'm making the right ones? And one of the hardest things to do is stare that fear in the face of, oh my God. And I can't second guess myself. That's the hardest thing here. That's the scariest part is every single thing I'm doing means that I cannot second guess what I'm doing.
It's
I
parkour.
have to,
You're jumping off this building and you can't think about if I don't stick this landing or whatever. You just have to jump assuming that you will and do the flip. Like,
yeah, you better roll or you're going to break a leg, buddy. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what the situation is and I'm really, really, I've managed to build a lot of great partnerships with people. And that's another thing that a lot of people should understand is build the partnerships that you have, work on those partnerships, build new partnerships, become a force of good, do good in your community, do good with the people in your community, because it's important that, number one, you respect everyone in your community, and try to foster, because this entire scene, albeit dark, spooky, face paint sometimes, sometimes not, uh, pointy stuff, etc. We're all supposed to be very much a fostering of community, and it's important that we build those relationships, because who knows who's going to be able to help you down the road, who's going to be a good source of information for you, or when are they going to come to you and ask for your help. You got to be able to give and take. This is what this is an entirely new model is we have to build this structure where we're more of a community than ever. We don't have record labels put like we do have a lot of record labels doing a lot of things, but we don't have the same level of record labels doing the things like we would have, our
You
Gravity Kills
social
Shelters and
media
all
for
those.
yourself now. You have to do promotion for you can't just rely on being an aloof a-hole rock star, show up for a photo shoot, and that's the end of your responsibility towards interacting with your fans. That day
Correct.
is gone. And like I
Yeah.
was talking with Raymond about that. No, like you're dead on right. Like that just I don't think that's ever coming back because people have an expectation of a certain amount of access at this point.
Yeah.
That is
I
just the
mean,
reality.
a good example of that is that festivals, large festivals, even, and I hate to use Capulet as an example, but even the Capulet Festival had artists who were doing VIP meet and greets at all levels, and that was, Skillet and God, I wish I could remember all the bands that were on that. I remember Skillet was on there. Yeah.
Sure, but
I'm not
yeah,
a fan of Skillet. It's just they have a silly name, and it's like, okay,
right.
Brian can.
But like you're saying, from like the top down, everybody has this same expectation that like if you're going to be successful at this point, you're going to hang out at the merch booth and say hi to everybody and smile and be there where normally that would never be happening. Like I some of the most successful modern at like Vision Video, we opened for them over at Smalls, and there must have been a line. I don't know how he did it. Dusty sat there and like was sweet and talked to every single freaking person at that sold out show.
Yep.
And that became an extra 2.5 hours on his night. And he did that every night of that tour. But
Yep.
that's what it takes now. Like that's what you have to be to really get to that top tier level now.
Well, it's not even that. And I mean, like, well, it is kind of get to that top tier, but speaking into the business side of things, and like this becomes business minutia, and I don't know how much you want to get into that, but like what we're all doing, a lot of us are, and I using Daniel Graves as an example, uh, because he said something recently on Threads, give or take. I think sometimes Daniel Graves is not everyone's cup of tea, but sometimes he says things that does make sense. And a lot of the times, a lot of musicians don't understand. They're selling a brand. They're your identity as an artist. What you write about, the music you write, is the advertisement for the overall aesthetic of your product. And while it's great, your music can be great, and people can buy CDs and stuff like that. Even the CDs are the product. The CDs, the T-shirts, the stickers, the patches, all of those things you're trying to sell to people. And this comes to a point where it's a little too businessy, and I might think that it's not the best course of action to continue this part of the conversation. So I'm going to say, let's strike most of that.
But no, I to your point, and look, I don't think this is a new thing in 2024 either. I think that, you know, it's always been true that you're up on stage and you're doing it, and your music has to be good. People have to engage with it and like your music. But it's always been true that the image or picture that you cast up on that stage, people in the audience need to want to associate with you. They need to look up on that stage and be like, that's me, or that's what I want to be a part of. That's what I want people to think of when they look at me is what's happening up on that stage. And those have always been the bands that were
Oh
able to
yeah.
stage and be successful, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's having the people be able to associate with like who you are, what you're singing about, you know, either you want to, not me specifically, but you want to be me, or you understand me, or you want to be friends with me. You want to that whole
I
thing where
wish
it's like
I
I
could look
get
that
you.
way in a leather vest, David Gahan. Yes, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. It's that. Oh man, he's such a pretty guy. I love him. He's so great. His voice is such a great like baritone tenor-ish level guy.
he's still pulling it off.
Yeah,
All right. So we're coming up near the end of the interview now. So I want to shift gears a little bit one last time. And another thing I always love to ask here on Sounds and Shadows is an artist that I like, what is something new that you're hearing right now that's inspiring to you? Whether it's, a band or even something out of genre, but something that you're hearing and you're saying, like, boom, this makes me want to go cut a new album. Hearing this like gets me fired up.
yeah. So I generally stick to out. So while I love in genre stuff,
Sure.
I also love outside of genre stuff. I try to stay away from, especially when I'm getting into a position where I'm working towards something like touring or something like that. So touring or trying to write an album. Those two things are my verboten period of no goth industrial, no punk, like no. We're not listening to any of it. So I go and during these periods of time, I lean into things like stuff that my mom would like listen to a lot. It's like George Michael and Prince, blah 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 blah. But like artists that I discovered on my own, that I've just fallen in love with, that help clean the palette, because these are palette cleansers. It's something ripping it out of the normal genre and going into another direction. Adam Neely, he's a bass music theorist on YouTube. He has a project called Sungazer. It is a jazz dubstep rock fusion project.
That sounds awesome.
It is fantastic. He does great work. He's got a huge fan base, so it's not like going and listening to him. Great, awesome. Please do. Sungazer's fantastic. But his fan base is huge. He literally makes a career off of music. He's one of the people that I aspire to be. Not as he's an idol or anything like that, but like I see what he's doing, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do that.
And then aside from that, what you just said, it just sounds like such an incredible synthesis of
Yeah.
I mean, just you even saying it real quickly, I was like, I'm gonna go look that up right after we're done with this interview. I don't know who that is, but like,
Lewis Cole is another artist that I have recently discovered that is just fantastic. Lewis Cole has a lot of interesting little side projects. So he has his own thing where he does Lewis Cole, but he also has another project called Knower. Apparently, I recently found out about this. Knower went on tour with like Red Hot Chili Peppers, and it was just like this massive. But they're like this weird, like funkish, like improv project. But that's Knower specifically,
there was a time when what you just said could have described the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I mean,
there's
lost that, but there was a time when that was true.
well, and like to that end, like the reason why I kind of like the funky nature of it is because I like TKK.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that leads into it. It's like, hey, this is not insane, but it kind of tickles those same funny bones. But most people actually know, and he'd be surprised. Supposedly, quote unquote, it's Lewis Cole, but the band Clowncore.
Oh, yeah.
If you've seen the Clowncore guys, which is the two guys, one of them was playing a saxophone and the other guy was playing a small drum kit inside of a porta potty back a number of years ago. That's Lewis Cole as well. Lewis Cole is a genius. His stuff is just insane. All of the things he does, all of the people he works with are just talented musicians. The work that those two groups, well, not the two groups, but Lewis Cole and Adam Neely, independently of themselves, I'd love to see them collab. That would be an insane thing. But yeah, those two groups together, or those two individuals, their music is like, oh, chef's kiss. It's like the weirdest that you could ever like get into modern day, outside of like the weird outsider music that normally get like like people are talking about and stuff like that. And I found a I need to go back and revisit it because it turns 30 years this year. 30 years old this year is Mirza's Venerology, because I love Japanese noise.
Yeah. Yeah. Another favorite of mine from that is a Guitar Wolf, one of the loudest concerts I ever saw live. Which it's just amazing, but also features my favorite zombie movie and its own interactive DVD drinking game that comes with the movie Wild Zero. So yeah, that's an utter classic. If you don't know Wild Zero, I'm gonna have to send that to you, Eric, because you would definitely be very into it right away. Uh, it is bizarre stuff, but the band Guitar Wolf wrote it and did the soundtrack themselves for it, and I think they're in Guinness Book of Records as the loudest concert ever played.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We are all the way to the tippy top end here. But one of the things I always love to do is spin out to a track that you choose from the new album that you feel encapsulates the Unitcode machine sound. If someone had never heard you before and you were having them hear one track from the new album to really get it, what would be the track that we should spin out to?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say the lead single off of it. So Undone is probably the best option.
I mean,
I think
it's a very solid one, and it has the cool, I don't know, like intro to it. So I think that's a great option, and we will spin out to Undone. Eric, this has been too long coming. We've been talking about doing an interview together for like years, hanging out at the dumpsters at Cold Waves. Has it
2
been
years. No, at this point it's been 3 years.
Yeah,
Because I missed last Cold Waves.
yeah, it was, I think, yeah, 2019 Cold Waves. But either way, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'm so excited for you for the things that you have coming up, and you really deserve them all. And I think a lot of people hearing this interview really get a sense of how earnest and hardworking you are about music. And I love seeing somebody that takes their own success on their back and carries it by putting in the time and effort for it. So I'm really geeked for it, and I'm excited to see you in Detroit and Chicago. Not that I'll see your show there; I'll only see it in Detroit, but I'll at least get to see you in Chicago when I head in there for Cold Waves. And this is for all of you out there at Interweb lands, the song Undone from Unicode Machine off the newest album that came out, Critical Fault from Dallas, Texas. For everyone out there in Interweb land, keep it dark, y'all.
I take every move I make, it seems so meaningless. I can't fight this pain, the shadows come again. I'm trying to defend a fate worse than a violent end. When the choice is not so clear, when this voice is all I hear, why can't I choose for it to end before the madness starts again? try to end. When the choice is not so clear, when there's voices all